it's really about what's the problem we're trying to fix first. Instead of saying we've got these great solutions and then what's the problem we're trying to fix, it's the other way around.
Brett Wilson, thank you so much for joining me. You're Australian Red Cross. I understand that you have some insights to give about how data maturity leads to AI, and it's something that a lot of CIOs and data leads are curious about at the moment. So I wanted to get your take on it.
Thanks, Gabby. I mean, data security and maturity is one of the key things, obviously, for us at Australian Red Cross. One is that foundational piece, so data governance. What does it look like? How do we make sure that we are applying sort of rules and methodologies around our data, but making sure that we are having a level of quality, but also securing that data as well? One thing that comes to mind is making sure that we're looking at, so from a classification perspective, around what we can share and what we can't share. But the actual quality of the data is probably the key piece for us, because if we get it wrong, it potentially could impact some of the field operations that we run, and someone could actually be injured if we actually don't get it right as well.
And in that security piece, one of the things that we hear is there is a lot of data in our organizations. We're very good at capturing and storing data. For that reason, a lot of it's rot, meaning it's redundant, it's obsolete, it's trivial. So when we start to map data outcomes to being AI ready, how do we isolate or deal with those data sets that we don't want included in our environment?
It's a great question. We're a bit of a cottage industry of applications and data, and that's been sort of developed over the last sort of 30 or 40 years, as most organisations would have as well. It's identifying, and what we've started doing now is we have an architecture that obviously looks at what does data look like, and focusing on our crown jewels as a starting point to say, and crown jewels could be restrictive data, so it might be child data or something like that, or it could be data that we perceive we might get value out of as well. And so I think it's really taking a step back and saying, what are the outcomes of the business of actually controlling this data and having access to this data? And there's some things that are sort of menial, and you're going to look at it and go, it's really important data, but it's not going to produce a business outcome. So I think it's probably taking the next step and really focusing on, as you said, business outcomes. What is the business going to get if we give them access to this data, and quality data as well?
And one of the things that people struggle with that outcomes is selling change to the rest of the organization. Because change can bring aversion to fear, but it can also bring some excitement. What are the opportunities behind AI? So how do you balance that with the need now to be cost effective and efficient and do more with less? It must be a difficult job, right?
We went through a significant change of transformation in the last 18 months, and so we rolled out a number of big platforms, so finance, marketing, CRM, HRS, and a number of others as well. One of those was really making sure that we created that digital spine. So it's a foundational piece, but we call it digital spine. So it's that neural network that our organisation runs on as a starting point. And I guess the change piece is, how do you understand what that impact is going to be on the individual, and not just sort of I guess your senior leadership team. It's that individual out on the field. Say, for example, when we activate recently for the New South Wales and Queensland floods, we activated 500 volunteers, emergency personnel, over 55 evacuation centres. So how do we make sure that we understand the impact of change that we're going to produce back here in the office on them, and how it actually affects them when we're activated as well?
And you talked about the importance of governance and that lives could be at risk with potential things. So how do you account for things like black box effect when you're going to deploy an AI solution, say to enable people on the front line or to help do things? Because with things like classic machine learning, well, yes, they automate, but you get the rate of impact of variables, and you can work out how your classification works. I think this must be hard with the new generation of AI stuff coming up now.
I think so for us, just looking at classification is a really, really, really difficult one, because we might have data that is related to children's data. So it's really sensitive information, but we might need to actually provide it through an AI tool that's going to give us a result that potentially might then predict harm to that individual child as well. So how do you find the balance between using tools, which, as you said, is kind of a bit of a black box? I guess the approach that we're taking is probably a bit of a slower approach around the use of AI. And so we've said, okay, we need to actually trust what the black box is going to do first. So smaller pilots, making sure we get a level of trust where we can say, all right, if we were to do it through AI, it's going to give us this result. If we did it manually, which was going to take us significantly longer, it would produce the same result. So I think it's more of that iterative approach where instead of just going feet first in and trusting what's going to come out of the black box, it's how do you validate, knowing obviously the manual process is going to take longer and potentially the use of AI is going to give us a better result, a faster result, but is it going to give something that is a known result that we can trust as well?
So I love this business outcome focus because when we surveyed about 200 CIOs in February, about half of them didn't have a use case for AI, which in particularly in the context of things like generative AI, I see in a lot of organizations that it's a solution looking for a problem. So I'm wondering how you go about getting those use cases. Do you consider how AI can help and then look for those cases, or do you go and get the business use case and go, well, AI is a potential solution, but these other things are a solution too? How does it work for you?
We go problem hunting.
Good.
So it's really about what's the problem we're trying to fix first. Instead of saying we've got these great solutions and then what's the problem we're trying to fix, it's the other way around. What are the big business problems that we're trying to fix? How do we use more efficiently our data, and how do we get some tools and obviously the data back into the hands of the teams that are out there in the field as well? So I think for us, it's, say for example, we just released a Gen AI assisted support bot. The problem statement around that was how do we provide a 24-hour sort of support around key things to enable the organisation to function when our teams are not available. So on weekends and at night time, because emergencies don't stop. They run 24/7. So how do we enable the organisation to be supported by most things? And so that was the problem statement around that. And then the outcome was we've put a Gen AI assisted support bot in the background, and it can actually resolve problems. So as a sort of estimate, we reckon we'll save about sort of 1.5 million hours of just waiting time of those generic sort of support tickets that over the next couple of years, just by having this one Gen AI assisted support bot.
That's brilliant because Peter from MIT this morning talked a lot about this need for real-time insights, this need for real-time action. How are you balancing things like, say, hallucination rates, because it is a Gen AI large language model? Is it about user education? Is it about having the right training within the actual data model? Because I would see kind of both of those as important, right?
I think it's both, and I was reflecting back on what Peter said and having a conversation with our CEO to say, well, what exactly do we need as real time? What is real time for us? Because it's different in every organisation. Real time on a daily basis, if we're not activated, might be, say for example, we do a lot of work with children, so if something happens around that space, it needs to be instantaneous. So that's your real time piece there. But if financials are a little bit late or something else like that, is it a real impact to the organisation? Finance would probably say it would be, but I would say it can be a day or two late if we have some sort of issue. In terms of, I think, hallucinations, I don't think we're probably advanced enough at that point in time to say how much is it going to affect us. But I think it's around education and training, that you can't just blindly rely on an output from some sort of AI, because as we know, it does hallucinate at times. If you search for your name within OpenAI, it'll probably give you a different result both times. And so I think it's important to say, take it on face value. It's a really good foundational point until you start training those modules or those LLMs, and then you can start trusting a little bit more as well.
It's brilliant. And look, final question. I ask this of everyone. How does your role look different in 5 or 10 years' time? How do you see it evolving?
I think if you look over the past 5 years and the next 5 to 10 years for the CIO, is we've moved out of sort of the you're just providing an operational service to now having a seat at the table. And I'm seeing more CIOs roles now actually evolving into that driving force of not just technology, but the business as well. And every organisation runs on technology now. They're a technology organisation. They just produce different outcomes. So for us, we produce humanitarian support, as well as a number of other community sort of programs as well. But we can't run without technology. So I see more focus and more demand coming from that CIO role. But you've got to be that really that CIO that can actually switch between contexts, and make sure you're actually focusing on the business outcomes rather than the tech.